fan's on, so I apologize if it's creating some noise for y'all, but it's 107 degrees outside, so the fan's gonna have to stay on. So we're ready to start stripping this thing down a little bit. The first thing I'm gonna do is just get this thing off of the hoist, which means we're gonna need to disconnect the transmission. So I'm gonna pick it back up and we'll take the little cover off down there. It would have been nice to pressure wash this thing before we got started, but didn't do that. And it's kind of hard to believe that this thing was pretty clean before our road trip, but it's got a lot of blow by. Some of it could be from that style air cleaner, but it's definitely puffing pretty heavily out of the oil filler, which it was not doing that prior to the trip. So I'm not saying we heard it on the trip. It's just after this thing drove for a while, I'm pretty sure the rings are just shot. I mean, it just, after it drove, they're just lost their spring tension, and it just either, well, okay, so I actually have two theories. Either the driving, the springs just kind of lost their tension, or if y'all remember how nasty this engine was inside, I have this theory, and I've seen it happen on like lawnmowers and stuff, where if you don't maintain them, what happens is carbon builds up, and that's what was all on the inside of this engine, was carbon buildup. But what it does is it'll build up behind the rings as well. And when it builds up behind the rings, it actually pushes the rings out, which, you'd say, well, that makes them seal more. Well, what happens is when it pushes them out and they seal more, they wear, being pushed out. Well, then, you get someone who starts doing maintenance. Like I said, I've seen this with lawnmowers, ones that have not had maintenance. You change the oil on them, and then all of a sudden they start burning oil. What happens is that new oil cleans, and it cleans that carbon up. And when it cleans that carbon up, now that carbon that was pushing the rings out is no longer there, and so the rings pop back in. Well, they wore out, and now they've popped in, so now they're loose and they're not sealing as well. That's kind of what my running theory is that we've now cleaned this engine up on the inside, and we cleaned carbon out that was pushing the rings out, and now they're not sealing as well. So we've got blow by. So that's why we're tearing into this, yeah. I don't remember if I've said this, but I've got those DOVE heads, D0VE heads, Dove heads, that we're gonna put, the whole plan was to put on this engine, but this engine already has blow by. Adding more compression to it is not gonna help it. So we're gonna tear it down, put rings in it, put bearings, replace camshaft, cam bearings, may deck the block. We've got one piston that had some detonation damage, prior detonation damage, that we're gonna need to at least replace that one piston. There was crosshatch in the cylinders, so we're gonna try to get by with just honing it and staying standard bore. Anyway, all that to say, I should have pressure washed this thing because it got grimy during that road trip, and yeah, all that oil down there is from blow by. It was just blowing oil and combustion gases all over this valve cover and down the valley and back, just all over this engine. So it's an oily mess, but we'll get it cleaned up. So we got to get the torque converter unbolted from the flywheel, from the flex plate, and then after that's done, I will carefully unbolt the transmission. I'll probably try to set the transmission on some kind of a rolling dolly. I gotta look around and see what I've got here that I can set it on, and that way we can move it around and we're not stumbling over it. We can kind of push it out of the way and make it easy to move around. But I do have a shift kit for it, and we're also going it's leaking transmission out of the front somewhere. I'm gonna guess it's leaking with it off only, so I think it's the pump O-ring seal is probably leaking. So We're going to take the front pump off, replace that gasket and the O-ring. We'll probably maybe put a shift seal in it, maybe, just because we're here. I don't think it was leaking, but we may just go ahead and do that since it's out of the car. And we will, already did the tail housing seal, so we're not going to worry with that. We'll put a new O-ring on the speedometer seal, a dipstick tube seal, and like I said, I've got a shift kit for it, so I'll probably put the shift kit in it, a new pan gasket, and call it good on the transmission. Unless, you know, this thing looked good when I opened it up before to replace the pan gasket. It had the plug that plugs the dipstick tube from the factory that they knock into the pan when they install the dipstick tube. It still had that in the pan, so I think the pan had never been off. Like I said, this thing only has 70,000 miles on it. The transmission was flawless during the trip. I don't think we're gonna see any issues when we pull the pan, but you know, if there's clutch material in there, maybe we'll dig into it, but there shouldn't be. But if there is, then that's really bad, because we've only got about 2,000 miles on this thing since we had the pan off of it. So yeah. All right, let me get busy. I'll bring y'all back when we get them separated. After I get them separated, I'm gonna put this engine on the stand, and we'll get the flywheel off of it, put the engine on the stand, and that's really just the goal for today. I don't have much time today, so I just want to get this thing up on the stand so I can kind of peck away at it when I've got a little bit of free time. It was kind of a big push to get this thing out of here. I'm just so limited on time, so I've kind of condensed all that down into one day working by myself, and again, it was above 100 degrees, and by the end of the day I was wiped. It's so hot. Well, probably the first time these have been in part in close to 50 years. I doubt very seriously engine or transmission have not been out of the car or apart from each other. Love seeing stuff like this. You know, that whoever wrote that, they may not even still be alive. I mean, that was written, you know, 48 years ago. So, you know, probably pretty old if they were not, if they're still alive. Anyway, so here's what we've got forward in their lovely, you know, spacer plate. I don't know why they couldn't make this spacer plate 2 pieces. You know, that would have been awesome. Make it 2 pieces so that you can take it off and get to the bottom. Like, you know, why not? But nope, got to take the starter off. Did want to show y'all, look how clean everything is in between. I mean, look at this. That's all shiny, like brand new. Look at that. Just awesome. So, rolling cart, just a scrap one. I don't remember what that was for. Maybe in a garage sale, a couple bucks at a garage sale, I don't know. But it's holding the transmission. That's going to get scooted out of the way over there. And then we're going to take the flex plate off. And then little spacer plate, get that out of the way. And then we're going to bolt it to the engine stand. And that will probably be all we will do today. I didn't show you, I went ahead and pulled the harmonic balancer off and pulled the spark plugs, since I was going to need to rotate the engine over to unbolt the flex plate. I figured I might as well, or unbolt the torque converter from the flex plate. Figured I might as well take the plugs out and make this easier. Need to come out anyway. Well, I guess I could have left them in these heads, but I was going to pull the plugs anyway, so might as well do them now. And if I'm going to tighten down that balancer bolt, again because I had it off. I might as well pull the balancer, so I did all that. And yeah, so let's see. Yep, so let me get busy. I'll get that out of the way, get all this apart, and next time you see me, the engine will be on the stand. So I think I'm going to go ahead and call it quits for today. Actually, I want to do something. So I think I'm going to just pull the distributor real quick, because I can do that in like a minute, because I've already loosened this bolt. And we'll throw that in a box, and then I'll feel accomplished that I did something other than just getting this thing on a stand. And I need to start a new baggie for parts. This will start the new baggie of engine teardown stuff. That's going to be, transmission removal related, bell housing, all that stuff. Let's see, our plug wires. Let's see. We're going to put a good set of plug wires when we go back together with this thing. Ah, shoot. I'm going to have to cut that. That one's a thicker one. Yeah, we're going to get a good set of plug wires. I rocked these cheap ones, but they are probably they were the cheapest thing on Rock Auto. I bought this one. I didn't know if this engine was going to run. I didn't want to sink too much money into it if it was no good, so I bought the cheapest. And they are pretty sorry wires. The boots on them are just junk. So single use probably would have been fine, but trying to get them on and off a few times, the boots just don't hold up. All right, I'm gonna pull the distributor out, and then I'll bring y'all back probably in a few days, after I've got a bunch stripped off the engine. Okay, so this is how far we've gotten it. We've got the heads off. We've got it mostly stripped down. We still got to pull the pistons out, but you can see kind of how sludgy this thing is still. It's pretty nasty, but I think it was starting to dissolve that stuff. It's getting a little soft, so I don't know if we maybe eventually would have cleaned that up. I don't know. It did bend the pickup tube when it dented the oil pan. You can tell that thing is got a hooey right at the pickup where it crushed it, which is, I mean, it's lucky we did it, because if you look at the spacing, it's right at the front of that hump, and that's what took the most impact. I haven't decided yet on the oil pan. I think I may order one, and as long as the quality seems good on it, we'll use the new one. This one, it's pretty creased, and I could hammer it out, but it's also really rusty on the outside, so I just feel like we're just better off just buying a new one, as long as it fits well, like I said. So I'm going to go through, again, these rods are marked, but I think I'm going to go through and just put a punch mark on each one. I just like doing that because they are marked by cylinder, which not frustrates me. It just, yeah, it's just not what I'm used to with the Ford. One, 2, 3. Is it 4 right here? I may have it backwards. And then 5, 6, 7, 8, or vice versa. I need to look at the engine and see. This is 1 right here. Yeah. Anyway, confuses me. So I like to go through and just dot 1, dot 2, dot 3, dot 4, dot 5, dot 6, dot 7, and dot 8. And those dots are to help me keep track of which one I reassemble. Well, you know what? I think it's fine. I'll make sure I can see the marks real good on each cylinder. We'll just do it like that because I don't think I'm going to use these pistons and rods. Reason being is, we've got that one piston that is damaged from, I'm pretty sure it's detonation. And so I think I'm going to use the set of pistons and rods that came out of that other engine. I think they're going to be better for us as long as they're the same. So I'm going to throw one of those in here. I measured the deck height or compression height, whatever you want to call it, on that block and then on this one. And I think we're going to throw one of those pistons and rods in here and just make sure that it's the same. We know the bore and everything's the same. I just want to make sure they didn't change that compression height on the piston. Between the rods should be the same, but what I'm worried about is the piston between the years. And I'm also going to check the part number on the rods. That is an externally balanced engine. This is an internally balanced. I don't think there's any difference in the pistons or rods between those. I think the difference is, of course, the crank and, well, the crank, and then this one is balanced on the crank. That one is not. From what I understand, it's balanced on the flex plate and the little hatchet. There's a little counterweight that goes on the externally balanced ones, but the pistons and rods are the same. I just want to verify that. So like I said, we're going to pull one of these out. I think I'm going to pick the damaged one just because I want to look at it a little better. But since I think I'm just going to not worry about labeling these, they're labeled as, we know they're labeled. For ease assembly, I just do punch marks on them because I'm just used to doing that on ones that aren't labeled. I'm blabbering on and on, but ease assembly, normally I just do that, but we're not using these and they are labeled, so we're just going to run with it. Anyway, I want to pull number 8 out, or number 7, whatever, number 8 or number 4, whichever one it was. I think it's number 4 actually. I'll have to look at it. Definitely some signs of oil burning. I'd flip this thing over, but it's kind of, it's not the easiest to rotate. I'll show you all at some point, but it definitely was burning oil. There's signs of oil at the top of the cylinders. These rings are shot. Good verification of that. So I feel confident in what we're doing here. I just need to get these out, make sure the cylinders look good, and make sure it looks like we can just re-ring this thing. I will take it and get cam bearings put in it. I checked I've got a cam bearing tool, but it's for a small block Chevy. And I don't have an insert that fits these cam bearings. So I think I looked up either buying an insert or buying a tool, and for the price of that, my machine shop will install the cam bearings. Actually, it's cheaper to have them do it, and they supply them, so it's cheaper just to let them do it. And I'm gonna have them clean the block. I'm gonna punch the core plugs out and let them clean the block. I may get the surface decked, maybe 10 thousandths or so. I haven't decided yet. Got to think about that and do some measuring, but that would get the quench a little better. It's not optimal right now at all. I think they're 27 or 28 thousandths in the hole, pistons are, and our gasket thickness I think is around 40 something thousandths, so that puts us in the 70s, and that's not optimal. Really it should be less than 60, but I'm not taking a ton off of this thing. 10 thousandths is probably all I would do, and that gets it at the upper level of quench. But yeah, I don't want to run into fitment issues. 10 thousandths is probably all we would do if we did anything. We're going to measure. So let me get busy and get this thing stripped down, pull a piston out, put a piston in, and we'll see what we come up with. Hopefully it's a good block. Yeah, for those of y'all wondering why I would tear into an engine that was running, like I said, it had blow-by, but here's our number 4, the one that had the detonation, and I had to sand, I say sand, used a roll-lock disc, Scotch-Brite roll-lock disc to smooth out the top of the piston where it had detonation. Over here you can see, you know, kind of a circular casting pattern on it, and then this one's smooth. It had just tons of pits. So, but this is the first one we've pulled. As you can see, that top ring is stuck. Now I don't know what we're going to run into on the other cylinders that we tear into, but this one was no good. Our bearing is okay-ish. You can see some of that brass color starting to show through. I mean, these would have been fine for a while, but you know, this engine definitely needed a refresh, I would say. I mean, that alone is reason for tearing into it. But we're gonna, everything else so far looks good. I mean, there was nothing we could do about this without tearing into this. I mean, this thing, we took it on a 2,000 plus mile road trip, and this is what we've got. So no amount of heat cycles, this would have always been stuck. This, most likely this ring has probably lost a lot of its tension. So not only is it stuck, if it ever did free up, it wasn't gonna, there was no sealing to it. Now, could this be detonation damage? Could the ring land or whatever? Could there be damage to the top of the piston that's squishing this ring? There could be. And this is why I didn't want to use this piston, because I knew that amount of detonation on the top of the piston, the integrity of this piston is not, we don't know. So there was no way I was tearing into this thing and reusing this piston. I can buy a piston, or I mean, technically we could probably just use one of those, but I'd like to keep paired up, so we'll just use that whole set. I didn't see any issues with any of those. All the rod bearings look good. Actually, I think they look better than these. We're putting new rod bearings in, I'm just saying, none of them had spun or anything to ruin a rod or anything on those. So as long as they're the same, balanced the same, piston and rod wise, and the deck height is the same, we'll use that set of pistons and rods. We're gonna inspect them really good, but I think that's what we're gonna do. They call for the same rings, so, you know, at least they've got some, at least that's the same, I guess. All right, so that's gonna do it for the teardown video. I'm gonna finish getting the rest of this stuff taken apart, and we will take this engine and crank to the machine shop. I'll have them just check over everything, you know, check the bores, and if there's any wear that's concerning, I'm not opposed to boring this thing or turning the crank. So I'm just gonna wait to order any parts till I hear back from them. And if we bore it, we bore it. If we turn the crank, we turn the crank. I wanna get this thing put back like new, within reason, I guess, but I don't want to cut corners then to have to circle back to it later on. So we've got the engine out now. Now it's time to do it. Don't want to just, you know, slap it together and have to tear back into it, you know, a few years later. So that's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment down below, hit the like button, and subscribe for more.